As I drove up here this morning and just set up, and my husband comes up and with a few other fellas helped set the tables up for us. And I said, it's really a shame that Carolyn's not going to be here because she blesses us so much. And he just turned to me, because he comes to help clear up as well, and he said, I walk in there after Take Courage on a Thursday. He said, everybody's talking to everybody. He said, it's such a good time of fellowship and you get blessed by the fellowship you have. So he sort of put me back in my little box. And so thank you everybody for coming. And I'm sorry that you won't be blessed by Carolyn, but I didn't find out till 7 o'clock last night that she wasn't going to be here. So I've been able to grab a few little stories about little things. And I think we're all capable of doing little things in different ways. And sometimes there are little things that we don't do, as one of our stories will tell you. So the first one is, they're from all over the world. And the first one is about a chap that was at the supermarket. And it says it's not a funny story, but a very touching story. And it's called Today's Clinics Moment. I was at a corner grocery store buying some early potatoes. I noticed a small boy, delicate of bone and feature, ragged but clean, hungrily looking at a basket of freshly picked green peas. I paid for my potatoes, but I was also drawn to this display of fresh green peas. I'm a pushover for cream peas and new potatoes. Pondering the peas, I couldn't help overhearing the conversation between Mr. Miller, the store owner, and the ragged boy next to me. It's on my phone, so. Hello, Barry, how are you today? Hello, Mr. Miller. Fine, thank you. Just admiring them peas. They sure look good. Would you like to take some home? Asked Mr. Miller. No, sir, got nothing to pay for them with. Well, what have you got to trade me for those peas? All I's got is my prize marble here. Is that right? Let me see it, said Mr. Miller. Here it is. She's a dandy. I can see that. Only thing is this one's a blue one, and I sort of go for red. Do you have a red one like this at home? The store owner asked. Not exactly, but almost. Tell you what, take this sack of peas home with you, and the next trip this way, let me look at that red marble, Mr. Miller told the boy. Sure will, thanks, Mr. Miller. Mrs. Miller, who had been standing nearby, came over to help me. With a smile, she said, there are 2 other boys just like him in town. All 3 are in very poor circumstances. Jim just loves to bargain with them for peas, apples, tomatoes, or whatever. When they come back with their red marbles, and they always do, he decides he doesn't like red after all, and sends them home with a bag of produce for a green marble or an orange one when they come to their next trip to the store. I left the store smiling to myself, impressed with this man. A short time later, I moved to Colorado, but I never forgot the story of this man, the boys, and their bartering for marbles. Several years went by, each one more rapid than the previous one. Just recently, I had occasion to visit some old friends in that Idaho community. And while I was there, learned that Mr. Miller had died. They were having his visitation that evening, and knowing my friends wanted to go, I agreed to accompany them. Upon arrival at the mortuary, we fell into line to meet the relatives of the deceased and to offer whatever words of comfort we could. Ahead of us in line were 3 young men. One was in an army uniform, and the other 2 had nice haircuts, wore dark suits and white shirts, all very professional looking. They approached Mrs. Miller, standing composed and smiling by her husband's casket. Each of the young men hugged her, kissed her on the cheek, spoke briefly with her, and moved on to the casket. Her misty light blue eyes followed them, one by one, each young man stopping briefly and placed his warm hand over the cold pale hand in the casket. Each left the mortuary awkwardly, wiping their eyes. Our turn came to meet Mrs. Miller. I told her who I was and reminded her of the story of those many years ago and what she told me about her husband's bartering for marbles. With her eyes glistening, she shook my hand and led me to the casket. Those 3 young men who just left were those boys. They told me how they appreciated the things Jim traded them. Now at last, when Jim could not change his mind about colour and size, they came to pay their debt. We've never had a great deal of wealth in this world, she confided, but right now Jim would consider himself the richest man in Idaho. With loving gentleness, she lifted the lifeless fingers of her dead husband. Resting underneath were 3 exquisitely shined red marbles. We will not be remembered by our words, but by our deeds. Today I wish you a day of ordinary miracles. A pot of fresh coffee or tea. You didn't make yourself, and I think you've all had that. Green traffic lights on your way home. The fastest line at the grocery store. A good sing-along with a radio or song on the radio, and we might have that later. Your keys found right where you left them. Never be in too much of a hurry to notice the ordinary miracles when they occur every day. So that was my first story about little things. The second one is a little bit more of a devotion, and it's a little bit harder to get into, but I hope you will enjoy it. It's written by a lady called Rita S. Snowden, who wrote some time ago, and it's called Ye Servants of God. So she said, I like to think that life is whole of a piece, made up of all little things. Little things, a kind word spoken, a cup of water given in the name of Christ, a lonely soul visited, a child helped to laugh, and a couple of dollars thrown into the offering for the love of God. But then you all know about this. There's a story from Burma. It has a long and fascinating history, and this story comes about a piece, and it's sort of like reality, but it really isn't. It says, once upon a day of life, the king and his chief minister chanced to be in a merry mood with time to spare. They stood a while by the palace window eating rice and honey, and as these 2 merry souls ate, they spilled some honey on the windowsill. I think of Ken when I read this. We have a man here that provides us with honey. So his story. Your Majesty, said the chief minister, I feared we spilled the honey. Let me wipe it up. My dear minister, said his Majesty, don't do that now. It will spoil our merry talk. And besides, it's beneath your dignity. So the honey was left. By and by, it dripped down to the street below. Look, said one of the 2 merry souls, the drop of honey has reached the street, and now there's a fly feasting on it. And together they looked. The next moment, they saw a spider pounce on the fly. Next moment, they saw a spider caught and swallowed by a house lizard. By the time there was another gap in their merry talk and laughter, they saw that a cat had pounced on the house lizard and eaten it up in one great mouthful. Then from nowhere came a dog, and as dogs are liable to do in a street where formerly nothing was going on, it flung itself after the cat. It went up and it caught it. Up in the windowsill, still the talk and laughter went on. It did not even allow of noticing from that nowhere had come the owner of the cat, who quarrelled with the owner of the dog. Soon a great fight had broken out. Then friends of both parties arrived on the scene, and in no time a fierce brawl was in full swing. Still, the king and his chief minister continued in the window. It was only, the story says, when the brawl spread to the streets nearby that the king ordered his guards to get to the place of trouble and quell the disorder. But the guards found themselves divided between the two parties, some sympathetic with one side and some with the other. The result was an even noisier fight. Soon civil war had broken out, spreading and upset the calm life of the whole state. In the end, the palace of the king and his merry, honey-loving minister was attacked, and both the king and the minister were killed. Therefore, my listeners, said the sad lawyer who related the series of happenings, I tell you to note that this is no small thing, that everything in life is linked. This is just a story, of course, and the old lawyer knew nothing of the wisdom of Jesus. He was not a Christian. He only thought of a kingdom that was lost for a drop of honey that hadn't been cleaned up. If he'd been fortunate enough to read the New Testament, as we can do, he would have learned that there's another side of the argument, that many good things in life owe their origin to quite small beginnings. One little thing added to one little thing, added to another little thing. It might just be a kind word spoken, a cup of water given in the name of Christ, a lonely child visited, a child helped to laugh, $2 thrown into the offering for the love of God. But because you know of these miraculous happenings in the life in which you share, you can see the better side of the Burmese story. And you're not too discouraged when you read your newspaper and realise that how much out there is bad that needs putting right in this world of ours. You are only able to do a little, but it does not stop you from doing the little that you can, because you know all the littles joined to other littles make great good. Jesus believed this to be so, and we will read about what he has to say in the Bible in a minute. Love matters most of all. If all those littles can be of love, for when the evening of your life comes, says John the Baptist, you'll be judged on love. Jesus said something full of surprise to many who listened to it. He spoke of a time when those before him would be separated one from the other, and some would be left with the question, when, on their lips. When we saw you in prison, or hungry, or a stranger, the answer lay in small things that are since been forgotten. And I'm just going to read that story from Matthew 25, and I'm reading verses 31 down to 40. It's called the Final Judgment. But when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will then sit upon his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered in his presence, and he will separate the people as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will place the sheep at his right hand and the goats at his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then these righteous ones will reply, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality, or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will say, "I tell you the truth, when you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me." So there is a prayer that goes with this reading, right? And it was written by Grenville Kleiser over 100 years ago, but we can still pray this today. And he called it my daily prayer. If I can do some good today, if I can serve a long life's way, if I can something helpful say, Lord, show me how. If I can right a human wrong, if I can help to make one strong, if I can cheer with smile or song, Lord, show me how. If I can aid one in distress, if I can make one burden less, if I can spread more happiness, Lord, show me how. I think that's a good prayer for each of us to pray every day. And the last story I want to finish with, it's called A Chicken Can Make a Difference. And this is a story that was written by a very good friend of mine. This be interesting when you know the author and you know the person that has written it. And this is a very true story, and it happened down in this district. So the author writes, "I had taken my daughter to the doctor again. Her infection had subsided and the fever was gone. However, she was extremely lethargic. He advised me to make sure she had protein with every meal and lots of vegetables. It was several days before payday, and I only had enough milk and bread. The cupboard had a few tins, some vegetables, and a couple of eggs. It wasn't going to cover our needs. My family was away, and I had just begun attending a new church. I didn't feel confident asking the church or neighbours for help. In truth, I was embarrassed. I decided all I could do was pray. Late that afternoon, there was a knock at the door. On opening it, I was surprised by the sight of a lady from my new church holding a roast chicken in a bag. I hardly knew this woman, although her children and ours went to the same school. She pressed the bag towards me, saying, "God told me to bring this to you." In shock, I reluctantly took the chicken, asking her, "Are you sure?" She repeated the same words, reassuring me it was true. The debate in my mind spilled out furtherly as I suggested that these things only happen to missionaries and committed Christians like pastors. These things don't happen to ordinary people like me. Once more she repeated her words, adding, "God loves you and wants you to have this." Then the reality hit me. As tears streamed down my eyes, I told her of my daughter's illness and my prayer. She smiled. "See, God heard you and used me to bring you this chicken." The revelation of God's loving provision hit me with great force. I finally understood what I had heard, but not really understood. All these years of Sunday school and church, that chicken became tangible evidence of God's amazing love for me. God cared for me and my family so much that he sent someone I barely knew to deliver exactly what I needed. That chicken, remarkably, saw us through several meals over the following days. God is incredible. That day was the beginning of a new faith journey for me. I have learned to stand on God's word and look for his simple miracles as well as the larger ones. A smile when you need it, a kind word, or a random act of kindness are all God-inspired. Listen like this. Thank you for listening.
And they're all hurled together by the licorice. And when I look around at you all this morning, we all come from different places, some from different countries, Some have worked in very different places to a lot of us, but we all have very different things in each and every one of our lives. And we've all got different stories to tell about our lives, haven't we? When Suzanne Modra left and she asked me to coordinate Take Courage, we had different ladies sharing about their lives, and that was so special because each lady had a different story to tell. So this morning I wanted us to look at a different group of men, and that was the 12 disciples of Jesus. They were all very different men. We had Andrew, Peter's brother, and Simon, who was known as Peter, and they were both fishermen, rough, tough fishermen. Then we had James and John, and they were the sons of Zebedee. And they were fishermen also, but they were also businessmen because they employed other people to work for them. And then we had Matthew, the other disciple who was the tax collector, who was hated by the Jews because he was a tax collector, and he was despised by his fellow people. Then we had Simon the Canaanite, and he was a zealot. And a zealot back in Jesus' day was he had fierce loyalty to his faith and Israel. And they were a religious sect who would arouse rebellion among the people because of the Romans. They didn't want the Romans in Israel. And so he was a zealot trying to get rid of the Romans in his country. But when Jesus called him to follow him, he remained very zealous, but his allegiance was with Jesus. And then we had Philip, and he was a close friend of Andrew and Peter. And so, in all likelihood, he too was a fisherman. Bartholomew, he lived in Cana of Galilee, and some scholars believe that he was of royal blood or noble birth. Not all the disciples are known of what they've done, but we all know about Thomas, who was called Doubting Thomas, and he lived in Galilee, but his occupation wasn't known. And then we had James, the son of Alphaeus, and Judas Iscariot, and they were tradesmen of some sort. Then we had Thaddeus. He lived in Galilee, but not much is known about him. And then we had Matthias, who the 11 disciples selected as the 12th disciple after Judas Iscariot betrayed Jesus. But these were a very different type of men, a very different group of men. And what did this group of men do? They changed the world, didn't they? They changed the world with a few hundred other followers. They changed the world. They took the gospel of Jesus Christ out into the world. And that's why you and I are here today, because of this very different group of men who went out to share about Jesus to the world. But this morning I also wanted us to look at 4 very different women. And the women were all very different, but they are all recorded in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. And they were Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. One had affairs, one was a prostitute, one lied, and one was an adulteress. And yet these 4 women are here, listed in Jesus Christ's genealogy. They were broken women, and yet God chose these women to be part of Jesus' family tree. And I just wanted to read Matthew 1:1-6. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac, Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob begot Judah and his brothers. Judah begot Perez and Zariah by Tamar. Perez begot Hezron, and Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Amminadab, Amminadab begot Nahshon, and Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. Boaz begot Obed by Ruth. Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David the king. David the king begot Solomon by her who had been the wife of Uriah. So I just wanted to give you a brief history of these 4 women. Tamar was widowed to 2 of Judah's sons, and Judah was one of Joseph's brothers. But Judah would not allow Tamar to wed his 3rd son, because it was Jewish law, if one son died, the wife married the next son. But when it got to Judah's 3rd son, he said, no, you're not marrying him, you'll die. So Tamar disguised herself as a prostitute, and she had sex with Judah, who was her father-in-law. And as a result of that encounter, Tamar had twin boys to him, Perez and Zerah, and we heard Perez's name being mentioned just then, because Perez is in the genealogy line of Jesus, and Tamar is mentioned. Then we're looking at Rahab. She was a Canaanite woman living in Jericho. She was a prostitute, but she saved the lives of the 2 spies sent by Joshua to spy and get information about Jericho's strengths. So by saving their lives, Rahab and her whole family were saved when Jericho was overrun. Rahab put her hope in God and put her faith in him, and she married Salmon, a Jewish man, and she had a son, Boaz, and from her line too would come the line of David and the Messiah, the Saviour of the world, Jesus. Ruth, she was a Moabite woman. She was the daughter-in-law of Naomi, who came to Bethlehem when Naomi returned to Judah, because they were widowed and both poor and penniless. Boaz was the wealthy landowner, and Ruth went out gleaning his fields during the harvest. Now Naomi sent Ruth at night to the threshing floor where Boaz was sleeping. And Naomi told Ruth to note where he lies down, then go and uncover his feet and lay down across his feet. And Naomi said, he will tell you what to do. Well, he did. He married her. They had a son called Obed, who had a son called Jesse, who had a son, David. KYB is doing the book of Ruth at the moment, and it's a beautiful book. It's only 4 chapters, and I recommend you all go home, open your Bibles, and read this book of Ruth, because it's a very special book. Then we come to Bathsheba. She was very beautiful, but she was married to Uriah. But King David saw her on a rooftop one night having a bath, and he thought, oh, I like that. So he took her. But before he actually took her, he sent her husband Uriah out with the army into enemy lines, and he told the generals to place Uriah in the front line, and he was killed. So that left the path open for David to take Bathsheba to the palace, and that was where she conceived a son, and he did later marry her. He did make an honest woman of her eventually, and the son that Bathsheba had to David was Solomon. And we all know that Solomon was one of the greatest and wisest kings. So Bathsheba is listed as the wife of the man Uriah, but that's who it is, who we've just read in the genealogy of Jesus. Now these were 4 very different women, all had very different lives and occupations, and 2 of those women weren't even Jewish. They came from other countries. But each one of those women were part of God's plan, his plan of salvation, to bring Jesus to earth, to be born in Bethlehem, to grow up and be crucified on the cross for you and I. When we look at a licorice of sort, what's holding it together? It's the licorice, isn't it? It's the licorice that holds the sweets lollies together. So this morning I'm asking you, what holds you together? What do each one of us have in our lives that holds and joins us together as Christians? And it's Jesus Christ, isn't it? Who flavours our lives each day with his love and his grace and his peace? It's Jesus Christ, isn't it? And isn't it wonderful that all over the world, no matter what colour our skin, what our race is, what our nationality is, whether we're young, old, rich or poor, we are all one in Christ, because he holds us all together like the licorice does in a licorice sort. So I hope you go home and remember these wonderful women that were part of Jesus' genealogical, I don't even know how to say the word, but that was from his line of birth. So thank you. And I think Shirley wanted to share something, so would you like to come and share, Shirley?